the truth tends to be somewhere in the middle. And there have been some emerging comparisons to like the Meghan and Harry drama. And I don't think that's appropriate. So like with Meghan and Harry, we knew that there were allegations of racism. She was dealing with postpartum depression, some like very serious, heavy issues that led to this rift. In Brooklyn's statement, and I'm a little bit team Brooklyn on this, there wasn't a single thing I could identify as something you can't come back from in a family. It wasn't like, this is the smoking gun. I could see why you would never want to reconcile with your family. Like,
Let's talk about that. Because what you just heard on The View is one of the rare moments where mainstream television actually slowed down, applied context, and said something that needed to be said out loud. Yes, there have been comparisons between a Brooklyn Beckham's family rift and Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. And no, those comparisons do not hold up. Not emotionally, not historically, not institutionally. And pretending otherwise does more than distort Brooklyn's situation. It actively minimizes what Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, went through. Now, before anyone starts frothing at the mouth, let me be clear. This is not an attack on Brooklyn Beckham. This is not dismissing his feelings. This is not denying his right to set boundaries. You can empathize with Brooklyn without rewriting the Sussexes' story into something smaller and safer. And that's exactly what The View shut down. One of the panelists said something critical, and I want to repeat it slowly because context matters. With Meghan and Harry, we knew there were allegations of racism. She was dealing with postpartum depression, some very serious, heavy issues that led to this rift. That sentence alone should have ended the comparison, because racism and postpartum depression are not family drama. They are not celebrity growing pains. They are serious, dangerous, life-altering realities. When Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, spoke about her mental health struggles, she wasn't speaking hypothetically. She wasn't speaking years later from a place of distance and safety. She was describing a period when she was postpartum, isolated, relentlessly scrutinized, and openly said she did not want to be alive anymore. That is not a disagreement. That is a crisis. When allegations of racism entered the conversation, particularly surrounding her child, that fundamentally changed the stakes. Racism is not something you work through with a family meeting. It's not something that disappears because people want the optics of reconciliation. It creates fractures that are structural, not emotional. And that is where the comparison collapses. Now, let's talk about Brooklyn Beckham's statement, because nuance matters, and I refuse to flatten his experience either. Brooklyn spoke about control. He spoke about pressure. He spoke about the weight of a family brand. He spoke about choosing peace and prioritizing his marriage. All of that is valid. But here is what The View correctly pointed out, and why some people got uncomfortable. They said there was no single thing in his statement that felt irreversible, no clear, this cannot be come back from moment. And that's not an insult. That's an observation. Brooklyn did not allege racism. He did not allege abuse. He did not describe a situation where staying meant psychological or physical danger. What he described was a long-standing, painful, emotionally complicated family dynamic. That deserves empathy, but it is not. Prince Harry did not step back because he was frustrated. He did not leave because of vague control issues. He did not walk away for aesthetic independence. He left because his wife's mental health was deteriorating, because racism was being dismissed, because protection was removed, and because staying inside that institution meant continued harm. That's not drama, that's survival. This is where the media's obsession with comparisons becomes revealing. Every time Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, are dragged into an unrelated celebrity rift, something very specific happens. Racism gets softened into tension. Postpartum depression gets reframed as emotional difficulty. institutional neglect becomes family misunderstanding. And suddenly, a woman who spoke openly about suicidal ideation is treated as a reference point for celebrity inconvenience. That is not accidental. People keep using Harry and Meghan as the template because their story is uncomfortable. It forces conversations about race. It forces conversations about mental health. It forces conversations about power and silence. And rather than sit with that discomfort, many would rather normalize it away by saying, "See, everyone goes through this." No, they don't. Here's another thing The View did right. They said they were a little bit Team Brooklyn. That matters, because acknowledging Brooklyn's pain does not require weaponizing the Sussexes' trauma. You can say, "This is sad and complex," without saying, "This is the same." And let's talk about power dynamics, because this is where lazy comparisons really fall apart. Brooklyn Beckham is stepping away from a famous family brand. Prince Harry stepped away from a centuries-old institution with constitutional influence, state-funded security decisions, and a media ecosystem deeply invested in preserving a hierarchy. Those are not comparable exits. Harry didn't just leave a family. He left a system that could, and did, affect his safety, his wife's well-being, and his child's future. That matters. Timing matters too. Brooklyn is speaking as an adult with distance, resources, and control over his narrative. Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, was navigating postpartum depression in real time, under global scrutiny, while pregnant again, isolated and unsupported. One situation allows reflection, the other demanded escape. And let's be honest about something else. When Brooklyn sets boundaries, he's framed as mature and self-aware. When Harry sets boundaries, he's framed as disloyal, weak, or manipulated. Same action, different framing. Why? Because Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, exists at the center of Harry's story, and the media has never forgiven her for surviving, speaking, and refusing silence. That's why people are so desperate for reconciliation in Harry's case. Not because reconciliation is always healthy, but because his departure disrupted a mythology. It challenged the idea that the institution is inherently protective. It challenged the idea that suffering quietly is noble. It challenged the idea that silence equals dignity. And that makes people uncomfortable. Brooklyn choosing distance doesn't threaten a system. Harry choosing distance did. That's the difference. So when The View said, "I don't think that comparison is appropriate," they weren't dismissing Brooklyn. They were restoring proportion. They were saying, not all estrangements are born from the same harm. Not all family rifts carry the same weight. And not all departures are optional. Prince Harry did not leave because it was easy. He left because staying was harder and more dangerous. And until people are willing to acknowledge that, they will keep forcing comparisons that don't fit. Brooklyn Beckham deserves empathy. Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, deserve accuracy. And those are not mutually exclusive. So let me know what you think. Are people genuinely confused, or are they deliberately flattening Harry and Meghan's story to avoid confronting racism and mental health in elite institutions? Drop your thoughts below. Like, subscribe, and share, because nuance clearly needs backup.